Next, on Currents News, a Queens priest is hitting the ground running, taking over a new parish devastated by the COVID crisis. But it hasn't stopped people from coming back to church. Politicians putting together a new deal to help the millions who are suffering, yet there won't be a tax cut. Mayor Bill de Blasio says federal agents shouldn't patrol city streets, not in the Big Apple or anywhere else.
It's literally making things worse. We're not going to allow that in New York City.
And a much-needed city escape. We are going to Europe.
Americans still aren't able to come to Rome, but that's why we're bringing the Eternal City to you. Our first stop is Piazza Navona, Rome's most famous public square, coming up next.
Plus, a new space race that brings you back to the Cold War. Superpowers on a mission to Mars. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichette. He went from one community hit hard by the coronavirus to another, taking over as pastor at Our Lady of Sorrows Parish in Corona, Queens. But this priest is ready for the challenge, filling some big shoes and helping parishioners get through the pandemic. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story from Corona.
As the new pastor, Father Manuel de Jesus Rodriguez isn't wasting any time when it comes to ministering to the parishioners of Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Corona, Queens. A vibrant community that's been devastated by the COVID-19 outbreak.
The church is committed to keep serving this neighborhood and offering any possible help that we can offer with the recovery and the overcoming of this terrible ordeal.
Before taking over at Our Lady of Sorrows, Father Manuel spent 6 years as the pastor of Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Jamaica, another neighborhood hit hard by the virus. Now his new assignment brings more challenges. Overcoming the pandemic will be a long road for the people of Corona. According to the New York City Department of Health, COVID-19 has killed 3,026 people in Queens. Nearly 80 of those deaths were in Jamaica, whereas in Corona, there have been 442 deaths. The parish was shaken when its previous pastor, Monsignor Raymond Rodin, contracted the virus. His recovery took a toll, and he wasn't able to resume his duties as the church's leader.
He couldn't reopen on May 26 because he was himself very challenged, but he left the parish ready for the reopening, and I am very grateful.
Now, Father Manuel is coming in at a time when the neighborhood is still struggling to conquer coronavirus. But the heavily Hispanic community is once again leaning on its faith. Compared to other churches where many parishioners are still hesitant to return, at Our Lady of Sorrows, more than 1,200 people attended Mass last weekend.
They really are committed to coming back from the virus closure. It's been really positive and outstanding.
Father Manuel is gentle with his parishioners, though he towers over most of them. But when it comes to fighting the virus alongside them, his promise is to be fierce. In Corona, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
An uptick in virus cases in some states could be the reason why another 1.4 million people have filed for first-time unemployment benefits. Last week was the first time jobless claims have gone up in nearly 4 months. This as some states roll back reopening plans and newly reopened businesses close down again. The good news, continued claims have gone down. You could soon get another stimulus check from the government. That's part of the $1 trillion plan Republican senators and the White House have agreed to. It would also include $105 billion to help get kids back to school and more money for coronavirus testing. But it won't include a payroll tax cut, which President Trump was pushing. House Democrats passed their own $3 trillion proposal in May. And it doesn't look like the coronavirus is going anywhere anytime soon. The U.S. is on track to surpass 4 million cases. And for the second day in a row, there's been more than 1,000 virus deaths in just 24 hours. Stephanie Elam has the latest from Los Angeles.
This morning, new coronavirus cases in California continuing to surge. The state reporting more than 12,800 new infections Wednesday. In Los Angeles, public health officials fear the virus could become the second leading cause of death in the county.
Our data for the past 2 weeks has really been moving us in the wrong direction. We've taken actions over the past few weeks that we're hoping we'll start seeing something different in the weeks ahead.
And they say young people are driving the spike in new cases here.
Be smart, don't gather, and please wear a mask. We need to assume that COVID-19 is everywhere right now. We need to be vigilant.
California, and in hotspots like Florida, now plateauing, or in the case of Arizona, decreasing in new weekly cases. But that flattening of the curve is staying at a high rate of infection.
We are certainly not at the end of the game. I'm not even sure we're halfway through. We've got to do much better in controlling the outbreak in general, but also particularly as we try to reopen.
In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis making this concession, despite still planning to open schools in the coming weeks, going against warnings from teachers and health experts.
The evidence that schools can be open in a safe way is overwhelming, yet I also understand the apprehension that some parents may feel, and I believe in empowering them with a choice. No parent should be required to send their child to in-person instruction if they don't want to.
President Trump attributing the rise in new cases to an increase in testing.
To me, every time you test, you find a case, and it gets reported in the news. We found more cases. If instead of 50, we did 25, we'd have half the number of cases. So I personally think it's overrated, but I am totally willing to keep doing it.
But according to health experts,
when we say that we've done more testing now, and in terms of absolute numbers, perhaps that's true, but that's because we needed to, because we have a lot more viral spread.
Even with some promising news about vaccine developments, a sobering reminder from Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I think ultimately, with a combination of good public health measures and a vaccine, that we may not eradicate it, but I think we will bring it down to such a low level that we will not be in the position that we're in right now for an extended period of time.
Again, that was Stephanie Elam reporting. As for a vaccine, just yesterday, the U.S. paid drug giant Pfizer and a German biotech firm close to $2 billion for up to 600 million doses, while China says it will have a vaccine ready this year. The NYPD can handle the job, and that's why Mayor Bill de Blasio is insisting today he won't allow federal agents to patrol the Big Apple. With crime and violent protests surging in many large cities, President Trump is deploying federal agents to crack down on violence. To de Blasio's way of thinking, sending in the feds is a bad idea.
It's literally making things worse. We're not going to allow that in New York City. We have the biggest police force in the country. When we ask for federal help, that's one thing. But when the President of the United States starts to use federal officers like his own personal police force, that's very dangerous for our democracy.
De Blasio is again blaming the surging crime wave in New York on the pandemic. All crimes are up 130% compared with a year ago. His Honor is saying closed courts and sick cops are largely to blame, and his strategy to flood hotspot neighborhoods with police should be enough to fight back against rising shootings and other violent crimes. New York City's mayor is not the only one objecting to the president dispatching hundreds of feds into cities around the country. Other mayors are also telling the White House to back off. Trump is saying the surge of federal law enforcement agents is necessary to cut down on the bloodshed from violent crime. Reed Binion has that part of the story.
Cities like Chicago and so many others that we just had a news conference. Chicago is a disaster.
President Trump announcing a plan to surge federal law enforcement officers to Chicago and other cities, describing those areas as rife with crime and violence.
People are dying in Chicago and other cities, and we can solve the problem.
Before he was president, Trump blamed his predecessor, former President Barack Obama, for Chicago's crime problem.
So why was it the president's fault then, but it's not your fault now?
He could have solved the problem, and he didn't.
Trump now blaming Democrats at the local level, making the topic a campaign issue as he runs on a law and order theme.
I think in their own way, they want us to go in. There'll be a time when they're going to want us to go in full blast, but right now we're sending extra people to help.
But local leaders don't want that help, including Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
That's what we call tyranny and dictatorship, and we are not having it in Chicago.
She later said that if they come, the agents need to be focused on gun violence, not policing on the streets. Numerous other mayors agree. 15 of them signed a letter calling on Trump to halt plans to send federal forces to major cities and withdraw those already present. This all comes on the heels of recent controversy in Portland over unidentified federal officers arresting protesters and putting them into unmarked vehicles. I'm Reed Binion.
The desecration and destruction of Catholic sites around the United States are increasing at an alarming rate. Now, Miami Archbishop Thomas Wensky and Archbishop Paul Coakley are condemning the incidents on behalf of all American bishops. They're saying the attacks are signs of a society in need of healing, and it doesn't matter if the crimes were committed by troubled individuals or agents of hate seeking to intimidate. The bishops add that the nation is at a critical hour of cultural conflict, and the path forward is found in the example of Christ's love. As protesters attack and vandalize statues of Junipero Serra, the Spanish bishop of the saint's birthplace in Mallorca is defending the missionary's legacy. Bishop Sebastia Taltavol calling the desecrations an injustice. He's endorsing the words of Los Angeles Archbishop Jose Gomez, who recently wrote that Saint Serra fought against a colonial system that treated California's indigenous people as barbarians. The Spanish cleric blames the media for disseminating bad information about the saint. A former Nazi concentration camp guard found guilty of being an accessory to murder. The 93-year-old, identified as Bruno D., covered his face as he was wheeled into the German courtroom in a wheelchair, convicted of being involved in the murder of more than 5,000 people from 1944 to 1945. He was given a 2-year suspended prison sentence in what will almost certainly be one of the last trials of a former Nazi. There's a lot more news headed your way. Since COVID has put most of our travel plans on hold, starting tonight, we are going to give you a tour of the Eternal City and give you the inside scoop on some famous spots. Plus, private religious services in China may not be so private, what the communist country is being accused of doing. And the U.S. has a new competitor in the great space race with a mission to Mars. Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
Since most Americans can't travel to Europe this year, we decided to bring a little slice of the Eternal City to you virtually. Throughout the summer, our Vatican correspondent, Melissa Butz, will take us on a tour of some of Rome's most popular attractions. First up, one of the city's most beloved squares, Piazza Navona.
Welcome to Rome. Today we're touring Piazza Navona, a favorite of both sightseers and city dwellers alike. These cobblestone streets are normally full of artists, musicians, and tourists, but before the 15th century they had a very different use. Since the 1st century, this square was a center for trading and bartering, a circus and sports venue dedicated to the Emperor Domitian that could hold 30,000 spectators. Yet there was also a much darker side to this iconic piazza.
During this time, it was also the place of persecution of the Christians. So if you can imagine, so many martyrs shed their blood and consecrated this ground right here. It's right here where St. Agnes would have also been one of the many saints who was martyred for the faith.
In fact, her sacrifice is honored with a church dedicated to her, St. Agnes. It houses a relic of her skull. The stairs leading up to it are strategically placed to avoid water damage when Pope Innocent X's sister-in-law would flood the square.
If you can imagine, with end of 17th century technology, managed to flood this entire piazza, about 3.5 feet, in order to recreate naval battle scene.
Today, Piazza Navona's main attraction is the obelisk and the Fountain of the Four Rivers, commissioned by Pope Innocent X in 1650.
People couldn't even imagine that this beautiful fountain could actually support the weight of this amazing obelisk that actually is not from here, comes all the way from Egypt and goes back to about 1500 BC approximately. And so it's called a silent witness because this would have witnessed the Israelites before and during the Exodus.
Once in Rome, the obelisk bore witness to the martyrdom of Christians, the raising of the level of the entire square by 70 feet at the end of the 19th century, and the onslaught of millions of tourists that normally fill Piazza Navona today. In Piazza BUTZ and Avona, artists and musicians interact with tourists all the time, giving this square a friendly yet traditional Italian feel. It's the perfect place to take a passeggiata or a stroll throughout the city, so you can get a taste of Rome's great culture and history. In Rome, Melissa BUTZ, Currents News.
Next week, Melissa will have a chat with some of Rome's most famous talking statues. We'll explain this centuries-old tradition as our series, Roaming the Eternal City, continues. We're waiting to hear if Pope Francis plans to visit a new mosque in Istanbul. The former church and museum, Hagia Sophia, will be converted to a mosque tomorrow, Friday, July 24th. Turkish President Recep Erdogan invited the Holy Father and other world leaders to attend the opening. Francis recently said when he thinks of Hagia Sophia, he is very saddened that the one-time Byzantine cathedral is being turned into an Islamic mosque. The Hagia Sophia is a UN World Heritage Site, and the Eastern Orthodox Church leaders are outraged over its transformation. The U.S. Bishops' Conference is declaring tomorrow a day of mourning, saying the Hagia Sophia stood as a sign of peaceful coexistence between Christians and Muslims for centuries. China is being accused of spying on religious gatherings in the communist country. Witnesses testified at a hearing of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom that the Asian country is using advanced technology to monitor both public and private religious gatherings. Things like smartphone location data, facial recognition technology, and video feeds from drones are being used, mostly targeting Muslims. Meanwhile, all eyes were on the skies in China as it launched its first solo mission to Mars. The probe is supposed to reach the red planet in February of 2021. If all goes well, the probe will orbit Mars, land a rover, and gather information about the soil, environment, and atmosphere, as well as search for signs of water. The U.S. is scheduled to launch its own mission a week from today. So the race is on, and the U.S. and China setting up a new arena in space for their growing rivalry. Ivan Watson reports.
Space, the final frontier.
For more than 60 years, nations have competed to see who can be first to go where no one has gone before. The country that leaps ahead in the great space race gets bragging rights and so much more. The Soviet Union shocked the world when it launched Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit the Earth in 1957. And followed up with an even bolder feat in 1961, putting the first human in space, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin. The Soviet successes, embarrassing for the United States, already in the throes of the Cold War with the USSR. Gagarin's accomplishment prompted U.S. President John F. Kennedy to famously declare his vision of putting a man on the moon before the end of the decade.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And go to the moon they did, in what would be the defining moment that led to U.S. dominance in space exploration for more than 50 years. It may have been late to the game, but China is now hoping to change that as part of its 13th five-year plan that singles out space exploration as a top research priority. Under President Xi Jinping, Beijing has invested billions of dollars in its space program. And in 2016, Wu Yanhua, deputy chief of China's National Space Administration, declared, "Our overall goal is that by around 2030, China will be among the major space powers of the world." Now, just 4 years later, and fresh from the success of being the first nation to send a rover mission to the far side of the moon, China is looking to raise the competitive bar with its first mission to Mars. The scientific team behind China Tianwen-1, which means Quest for Heavenly Truth, say their probe is different because it is, quote, going to orbit, land, and release a rover all on the very first try and coordinate observations with an orbiter. This is unlike NASA, which launches its Mars missions in stages and plans to send its 7th Mars mission later this month. If successful, China's Tianwen-1, NASA's Perseverance, and the United Arab Emirates' Hope, the Arab world's first interplanetary mission, will all three reach the red planet in February 2021. And while scientists look to work together to uncover the planetary secrets of Mars, China and the U.S. have put their space programs into overdrive, signaling more competition between these rival superpowers, each hoping to pull off the biggest breakthrough in space exploration, such as putting a man or a woman on Mars perhaps as early as the 2030s. Both hoping to be the first
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Ivan Watson, Hong Kong.
Still to come on Currents News, looking for a good summer read. The Vatican's got a suggestion, and it's hot off the press. Also ahead, they're planning a family reunion, but they've never met. How a woman found the brother she didn't know she had. Words likely to echo down through history are now being made available by the Vatican. The Pope's so-called lockdown homilies are being published in a new book. The preachings took place every morning while much of the globe was under quarantine. The Holy Father celebrated daily Mass that was live streamed around the world from early March until mid-May. The volume is titled Strong in the Face of Tribulation. And finally tonight, long-lost relatives connecting thanks to a DNA test. A woman in Vermont found her biological brother on Long Island. Now they're planning a reunion. Liz Streppa has the story.
My concern was it could be a day too late.
When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Sally Laurent knew there were people she still wanted to meet.
It's been an interesting journey of discovery.
She and her older half-sister were both adopted as babies.
I always knew, I didn't know what it meant. To me, it was just another way of being born.
They were raised Jewish by their adoptive parents on Long Island, but Laurent always wondered who her biological relatives were, so she took a DNA test.
I discovered there was not one bit of Jewish blood in me, which is okay because I've benefited from all of this,
She also discovered her biological brother, Bob Stanko, is alive and living on Long Island, so she called him from her Vermont home where she's been for the last several years.
When she reached out and found somebody, to her, this is her blood, something she never had.
And Sally is a sister Bob never knew he had.
They didn't even know I existed.
I knew I had a brother and a sister, full-blooded, who lived with me growing up. Prior to that, I had no idea of anyone until my parents passed away.
He now knows he's one of 7 children his mother gave birth to, but right now he's looking forward to making up for lost time with his long-lost sister.
And we know that once this clears up, we're going to make a beeline to her.
It'll be a heartwarming family reunion.
So it would give them a family that they don't have.
Decades in the making.
Again, that was Liz Streppa reporting. Sally took the DNA test through 23andMe and also found out she's Italian and German. And that is Currents News. Currents News Special Edition, anchored by Michelle Powers, will air tomorrow at 7 p.m. and this weekend starting Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Several rebroadcasts will follow, including on Sunday. Go to netny.tv for the complete schedule. I'm Christine Persichette. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.